Hey everyone, welcome back to Evan's channel. It's currently the NBA offseason, and one of the biggest topics right now is probably where LeBron will play next. Rumors are everywhere, different reporters are saying different things, and even LeBron himself seems to be keeping the suspense going. So today, let's put all the off-court news aside and go back to the game itself to see what LeBron looks like on the court at this stage of his career. For this video, we chose Game 2 of this year's playoff series between the Lakers and the Thunder. In this game, Shai was still unstoppable while the Lakers' offense looked a little weak without Luka. Let's go straight to the fourth quarter. At the start of the fourth quarter, Reeves was not on the floor, so LeBron essentially took on the role of the Lakers' primary creator.
18 points in game one, they win by 18.
On this possession, he first tried to cut inside using smart screen, but Dort quickly fought around the screen and pushed him away from his intended path. LeBron then tried to establish position inside for a second time.
He has 13 tonight.
This time, he managed to get position around the mid-range area. But when RUI tried to throw the entry pass to him, Dort fronted LeBron and came away with the steal.
And they are up 13.
Dort, the step.
Actually, this was not the only time LeBron had this problem in the game. Earlier, when he tried to establish low post position against Caruso and call for the ball, the pass was also stolen. From these possessions, we could see pretty clearly that his strength, explosiveness, and stamina have all declined quite a bit. And it is worth noting that these defenders were much shorter than him. When LeBron was younger with greater upper body strength, he probably would have established much deeper low post position. In many situations, he would not even have gone into a post-up. A younger LeBron was more likely to bring the ball up facing the basket and use his speed and physicality to create advantages. But now, things are different. As his speed and stamina have declined, he has become more and more dependent on post-ups, using his body weight and strength to gradually back his way inside. This is also one important reason why he can still maintain a certain level of offensive value this late in his career. Even at 41 years old, his weight, strength, and overall physical size still give him a clear advantage over many players at his position. Of course, from another perspective, the modern game has less defensive physicality and more spacing. This also makes it easier for him to find opportunities to use his size to solve problems on many possessions. Now let's look at the next possession and see what happened with Shai.
Point lead,
He had just crossed half court and was still around the logo, but the Lakers' overall defensive positioning had already started to slightly shrink toward his side.
Alexander back on the floor for OKC. They double.
Then Lakers #1 came up to trap him. The Lakers were already giving Shai what I would classify as 40-point defensive pressure near half court. This was actually a pretty crazy scene. Normally, the half-court offense had not even really started yet. But the Lakers' defensive structure had already been distorted by Shai's on-ball threat. Honestly, this reminded me of Curry in 2020-22. Of course, Curry's ability to directly destroy a defensive structure with his deep shooting gravity was even more extreme.
With Thero. McCain, ball movement. Dort.
But even though the Thunder did not score on this possession, visually, the Lakers' defense was already being completely dominated by Shai. Now let's go back to LeBron. On this possession, he initiated a pick and roll with the ball. This has been one of LeBron's classic offensive actions throughout his entire career. But compared with his younger years, one detail had changed. His offensive initiation point had moved farther away from the basket. The offensive initiation point be understood as the area where the defender begins to apply real pressure to the ball handler and the two players are about to make physical contact. On this possession, LeBron's initiation point was already outside the three-point line. In other words, the defender was willing to start applying pressure to him beyond the three-point line.
To overcome them, at least in the Houston series.
And here, the defender chose to aggressively fight over the screen and stay attached to the ball handler. But this was not because the defender was particularly afraid of LeBron suddenly pulling up for a jumper from this area. This was never one of LeBron's most reliable operating zones. The real reason was that his first step burst had clearly declined. The defender could afford to shift his defensive position higher and pressure him farther away from the basket.
They're averaging almost 8.
On the next possession,
34-15. It's the same story.
Mitchell quickly rotated into position. At this point, LeBron actually had some space to attack straight toward the basket. But he did not immediately drive. And he did not shoot either. For the reasons we just discussed, he still chose a method that is now more stable and requires less explosiveness as the post-up.
Here tonight. LeBron backing down on.
He used his body weight and strength advantage to gradually back his way inside. Once he finally worked his way into the mid-range area, the second layer of defense came over, and the defensive pressure increased to 40. At that point, LeBron was forced into an offensive dead end and had no choice but to pass the ball back out.
Mitchell, kick it out. Hachimura missed it. Ayton, offensive rebound, reload. Hachimura.
However, this was not actually a problem that only belonged to older LeBron. We talked about this before in our breakdown of the 2007 NBA Finals. Young LeBron's post defense also often turned into an offensive dead end when he faced stronger help defense. Whether it was real help or fake help, as long as the second layer of defense arrived in time, his post-game processing at that stage was not developed enough to consistently continue creating advantages. Now let's look at the next possession.
Been able to score, but got fouled as he brought the ball down.
That is the third team foul against the Thunder. LeBron on the drive. And LeBron on the left.
Reeves had already returned to the floor, but the Lakers still gave the ball to LeBron. After catching the ball, LeBron used his speed to attack the basket and finished with his left hand. Honestly, seeing a 41-year-old make a play like this was still pretty incredible, especially the quickness of his final jump. Before Hartenstein could fully jump to contest the shot, LeBron had already reached the highest point of his jump.
LeBron surveys. He will step back and connect for three.
On the next possession, Hartenstein played drop coverage, and LeBron immediately shot the three and punished the mismatch. LeBron often uses this kind of adjustment to control his shooting rhythm. After gathering the ball, he used something similar to a 0-1 to step, while gathering the ball on the left side of his body. This essentially allowed him to transform the rhythm of an off-the-dribble shot into something closer to a catch-and-shoot rhythm. He could turn an off-the-dribble shooting situation that he was relatively less comfortable with into a more familiar catch-and-shoot rhythm. This has also been a very useful adjustment for him in the later stages of his career. Now let's look at the next possession.
Play in regulation.
This time, LeBron was the primary defender on Shai. Shai almost beat him with one step.
Lakers back to their
Ayton then tried to close off the driving lane, but it was already too late. Because the first layer of defense was beaten immediately, LeBron created almost no delay against Shai. As a result, the help defense at the rim simply did not have enough time to react.
starting lineup.
Gilgeous-Alexander gets to the rim.
In the end, even with what I would classify as 60-point defensive pressure from the Lakers, Shai still broke through the entire defense by himself. This really gave me a little bit of an Allen Iverson feeling. At some point in the future, I would also like to talk about why Shai was not nearly as effective offensively against the Spurs as he was in this series. But going back to LeBron, point-of-attack defense is no longer his main defensive responsibility. At this stage, most of his defensive value comes from help defense and the amount of space he can cover defensively. But at least from this possession, we could clearly see that his one-on-one point-of-attack defense against elite ball handlers had declined significantly. Now let's go back to the Lakers' offense. On this possession, Reeves, the primary creator, still could not create an advantage. In the end, LeBron had to step up again.
Reeves operating, switch out front. Caruso who backs off. Hachimura trying to get rid of it. Tries to shoot. James against Wallace.
He once again chose to post up and back his way inside. The defender tried to reach for a steal but failed, which caused him to lose his original defensive position. LeBron took advantage of that and continued toward the paint, eventually finishing with a left-handed floater over the help defense.
LeBron. Oh, he switched hands!
My God.
The next possession was also interesting.
With Blake Griffin and Dirk Nowitzki, what they said in the
LeBron first used his body to seal Caruso and then deliberately slowed down. Deliberately slowing down is a very advanced skill in basketball. We often see Luka use this technique. It means that your initial burst has to be quick enough, while your core strength also has to be stable enough for you to control your body and deliberately slow yourself down. Your upper body strength also has to be strong enough so that you can control the rhythm of the possession and keep the primary defender reacting to you. It is also very difficult to deliberately slow down after using a hard pound dribble, because the impact and forward momentum of the pound dribble are so strong, and your entire center of gravity is already leaning forward. So it is not as simple as saying that as long as you explode quickly with a hard pound dribble on the first step, you can immediately gain positional advantage and then deliberately slow yourself down.
Studio, I still like the strategy.
James. Baker, no. Tapped over.
He waited for the help defense to recover, then used his body to push Caruso away and created a jumper. Although he missed the shot, these consecutive possessions showed us something pretty clearly. A significant portion of the Lakers' offensive volume in the fourth quarter was still being carried by LeBron. That was already more than the workload you would normally expect from a secondary creator. It is also worth mentioning that the movements on these two plays were not particularly textbook or especially smooth-looking. The later LeBron has gotten into his career, the less he seems to care about making every move look technically standard. To put it simply, he looks a little more fearful now. But strangely enough, he seems pretty comfortable playing this way, and his actual efficiency is not bad either. After that, the game gradually moved into garbage time. The Lakers were dominated by the Thunder throughout the game, so there was not much else worth discussing after that. Finally, let's sum it up. The Lakers' offense in this game was relatively simple, and even in the fourth quarter, they still needed LeBron to forcefully carry a significant amount of offensive volume. If a team needs a 41-year-old player to consistently take on that kind of responsibility, it is obviously difficult for that team to go very far, and the results are unlikely to be very stable. I think the ideal role for LeBron at this stage is more as a secondary creator. Let the primary creator absorb most of the defensive attention first, and then let LeBron use mismatches, post-ups, and catch-and-shoot opportunities to provide additional creation on some key possessions. This allows him to make the most of the strengths he still has while avoiding constantly exposing the limitations of his stamina and explosiveness. But with that being said, considering his age, I think the offensive performance he delivered was already quite impressive. That's all for today's breakdown. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.